This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, everyone. How are you? I'm so glad to see you all. Mr. Moore, congratulations. Through. Thank you so much for all that you're doing. I really appreciate it. Carter and I wanted to have a conversation with you all about what's going on with your case and how you think it went. And one of my overwhelming, I don't know if that's the word I want, but a question that's just burning inside of me is, do you think the MBE program works? That's the number one question I have for you all. And then now I'm just gonna let Carter take it over.
Hey, I'm just following to what Carmen was saying. I was really pleased to see you guys pull a press conference because I've been saying it for the longest time. In order to get some results, you have to expose those that are doing wrong in the light in order for them to shape up and act in a decent manner. So I'm proud of you guys for standing out front and taking that fight on, because a lot of people don't like to be in that place, and because they're so afraid of being blackballed. So, and I wanted to do a follow up because we lost some audio from you guys' press conference, and I just wanted to get more out of what you were talking about.
Well, we're grateful for the opportunity to talk about this. And frankly, a lot of you guys have been in this fight a lot longer than I have. You are closer to the challenges. You know the realities of it. I will just say this. Don't take my assessment for the ultimate answer of whether the MBE program is working. It's just not. Year after year, decade after decade, we see countless examples. Some make it into the public eye, many do not, where minority contractors are getting raked over the coals. And one of the reasons why that happens is because the primes who make all these commitments, who sign all the papers, who file all the exhibits, know they can get away with it because there are no consequences. And there's no consequences for three different reasons. The first one is there's rarely anyone even looking and double checking. The audits that you need to determine whether or not the money was paid out, those are not systematically done. They are rarely done. And when they are done, it is the exception, not the rule. The second problem is, even if you get that data, you've got to find a way to marshal the argument and bring that argument to the Board of Estimates. And that process is daunting. And the Board of Estimates doesn't particularly appear to care. And then the third thing is, even when there's an audit, even when it's brought to the Board of Estimates, even when somebody is paying attention, the consequences are non-existent. And I analogize to this not because it's the same, it's not, but because it's an area that I'm familiar with in Baltimore City. It's the same thing that we see when you don't have consequences in other contexts. We're all human, whether it's the squeegee boys or a prime contractor or a drug dealer or a gang member. If you are taught over and over again that there are no consequences for breaking the rule, that there is no results for doing whatever is in your best interest and no one else's, guess what you'll do? You'll do what's in your best interest and no one else. And so as much as I'm mad at the primes for making these commitments and breaking their promises, at the end of the day, our failure to hold them accountable is what's facilitating it.
Hey, I 100% agree with you with that when it comes down to that statement, because no one is being held accountable. No one has to really live up to what they have pledged, because you have nobody overseeing them. So again, I want to say that the MBE program is flawed. It needs to be revamped. It needs to be relooked at. These guys have had a system put in place to pacify people, or quote unquote, just to make some things seem that they are better, but they are not, because they're still networks that are in place that will not allow the small prime to become, or small minority to even become a prime. Because again, if you're saying, I want equality for everyone, well, why are you only giving me a percentage of something? A small, a small percentage of that. That's saying that I'm just pacifying you to shut up, right? So if you say equality means 50-50,
Hey, Carter, I'm sorry, I don't mean to disturb you or interrupt you. But something is definitely shaking and we can hear it comes across as really bad static.
is it staticky now?
No, but don't move because
Okay.
it rubs up against your vest. Thank you.
Okay. So, and again, there are systems that are in place that still barriers that need to be broken down when it comes down to the small minorities and getting our fair share. Um, and I'm seeing that there's something that's, I don't know what's in the atmosphere right now, but there's some things that are being exposed. Like I read the other day, we had a situation where I guess a contractor said that he gave the minority more than what he did when he didn't give that dollar amount. Um, and these kind of things have been happening for years, and they're still happening now. And if you think this is just on a city level, it's happening on a state level too as well. And it's at a much higher scheme.
Carter, can I provide some history?
Uh-huh.
Sure.
I mean, let's remember that for every one of us who went to law school, we studied cases that went to the Supreme Court where one year after another, one decade after another, people brought legal challenges to efforts by the government to give minorities their fair share, right? A lot of these efforts were struck down. So a government would try to set up a minority quota, and that was struck down by the US Supreme Court. Eventually, we came up with what is a partial solution, which is that for every contract, there are a certain share that has to go to minority enterprises. And let me be clear, that's not as good as it could be, but it's a starting point, and you said it so well. The goal is not for Russell Moore's business to be a perennial minority contractor. The goal is to give Russell enough capital and enough cash flow and enough experience that he himself could become a prime one day, right?
Exactly.
That's the goal. It was
Right.
not to ensure that we had a permanent underclass of minority businesses. It was to give minority businesses a foundation so that they could take it to the next level and become the primes of tomorrow. And this has always been the case, right?
Yes.
The plumber who starts is supposed to become a master plumber. And the master plumber is supposed to become an employer of other plumbers. And that subcontractor company is supposed to grow to become a prime. That is the evolution. And just as each of us in our careers goes from being an analyst to an associate, to a counsel, to a partner, to managing partner, that is supposed to be the growth curve of minority businesses, of blue collar electricians and plumbers and construction engineers. And so that's the goal. But if you stop people at step one, if they can never climb above being an MBE because they're only getting a sliver of the sliver, right? MBE
Right.
doesn't guarantee you 50%. You get a sliver. And if you're not even getting that, there is no chance you can go to that next step. And so the historical context is important to me because we have put up systematic barriers for decades, but one by one, it is the slow march of progress. We've torn them down. We've convinced the US Supreme Court that MBE requirements are constitutional, so long as they are of a certain size and a certain scale and a certain character. It can be one factor in the overall decision. And then we finally get to enforcing it, and we don't have that happen. And so, Carter, I'm going to be a little bit more optimistic than you. Given that we do have a structure that is past legal muster, at least for the moment, what we really need, and let's just make this very simple. Imagine that for every contract that went out, there was a database, a public database, where you could click and you could see the MBE expectations and you could see the MBE results. So you
Right.
don't have to have some lawyer pull out a PowerPoint presentation. You could just click on Metra Industries Incorporated, and you
Right.
could see, WC 777, and you could click on that contract and you would see 13% MBE goal. And right next to that, you would either see 0, 5, 10, or 15. And let's be clear, nothing stops them from going above the 13%. That is the minimum threshold. So
Right.
you might even want to reward Metra because they went beyond the call of duty. And that could be on a public database. That could literally be on the Department of Transportation or DPW's website. So you could go see that. And imagine if the result of not meeting your 13% was that somebody at the Board of Estimates said, I'm sorry, we have laws that say that you are prohibited from being eligible for the next contract if you fail to satisfy the results of the other, particularly when you haven't gotten a waiver. And my job as the Board of Estimates, just like your job was to audit it and put it on the website, is to say you're no longer eligible. They even say you're only no longer eligible for 2 years. It's not a permanent debarment. There
Right.
is a measured punishment. And so, Carter, I'm actually not sure that the problem is with the fundamentals of the program. The problem is with the fact that the program as designed is not being enforced. And so,
Okay.
and I'll make one last analogy and then I'll shut up. Every General Assembly session, I see a bunch of advocates and lobbyists go down to Annapolis and they say, we need this new law and we need that new law. In the criminal context, people are saying we need more gun laws on the books. We need to raise penalties. And I have always said, if you just took all the laws that are on the books, and there's a lot of them, and you enforced those laws, you wouldn't be perfect, but you'd make a lot of progress. And I think that's the current state of the MBE program.
Okay, so not revamping, but we're asking for more oversight and more governance. Is that what you're saying? So
I think that's a start. If
okay.
the office
And
responsible
transparency.
for auditing and the Board of Estimates responsible for approving and issuing and imposing penalties did their job, if we could
Okay.
restaff those two institutions, let's start. Russell Moore would have gotten $8 million over the course of those 7 contracts, not $1 million. The people that were subcontractors 2 years ago wouldn't have gotten 0%, 0%, and 0%. They would have gotten 9%, 13%, and 21%. And so that's not 50%, but that is a foundation on which we can build.
Right, but even, and again, if you kept track of that, and again, and like you said, over those contracts, Moore would have got 8 million. It should come a point where he graduates out of that program, and now he is a prime to
Absolutely.
bring someone up. So again, we're talking about governance and transparency, and more oversight, because again, no one is really governed. I mean, they make it seem as the minority is more wrong than the prime. You have your MBE program, they will look at you as you've done wrong when it's not.
In fact, Carter, and I'll make a quick analogy to tax loopholes.
Mm-hmm.
We have created a structure where we know that profit-driven businesses will try to exploit loopholes, okay? That's just the nature of capitalism. It is the nature of the market. I wish it weren't that way, but businesses are always going to try to find a way to take advantage of a tax loophole, take advantage of a MBE exception. So they can always say, oh my goodness, the city reduced our amount, so we have to reduce the minority contractors amount. Oh my goodness, we have a problem because it's an emergency, we need a waiver. They're still going to try to take advantage of those things. And the only guardrail against the natural temptation of businesses to exploit loopholes is government enforcement, government oversight. And so if you remove those guardrails, you're going to have what we have, which is decades, and I mean literally decades, of promises being made and promises being broken.
So
because right now, in my opinion, excuse me, Carter, right now it's really oppressed. And I'm coming from because I am a woman business enterprise, certified with Maryland, We Bank, DDOT, everybody. And it's really so I do a lot of hauling. I have a trucking company, and it's really, the rates are ridiculous. And it's like, you can't get help with the MBE office. I don't even know who to reach out to. And even in sending stuff, sending emails, no one responds. We're overwhelmed. Well, I don't know why we keep putting people in the MBE program when it is definitely broken. We did a protest last year. Carter and them did one in Baltimore City. Then we went to the MBE outreach. And though we were very, you could see it, that's for sure. After the meeting, nothing. So you do all this, they want you to come out, make this big noise that you're here, or we're here for you, and it's just all lies. And to me, flat out, it doesn't work. Now I understand that you're saying that it needs oversight, and maybe that's what it is. But just being at the bottom of the totem pole, so to speak, right? Which I don't know how they say that about trucking, because there's no infrastructure without dump trucks, right? The whole infrastructure of the United States, how you get anything in your household is through a truck, right?
Carmen,
So what I don't understand is, why don't you have time to do your job? And just perhaps it needs to be revamped. And so to me, the MBE program does not work. And Carter, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, all I was going to say, Carmen, is I want to be clear. I think I've always been described as half idealist and half pragmatist. And I think that's actually true. It's not that I think the MBE program isn't profoundly broken and ought to be repaired. I'm just realistic about what kinds of changes you could actually get done, right? If you said we need to have 50% of the primes in Baltimore City be local Baltimore-based minority-led companies, what would happen? Number one, the legislature wouldn't pass it. And even if you got a legislature to pass it, number two, somebody would go into court and convince a court to strike it down, okay? So part of my problem is, even though there is a higher aspiration to which we could appeal, I have to be realistic about whether we can get there. What we can do literally today, what we could have done yesterday, what we could have done decades ago, is just enforce the rules that are there. And you know, people always say, oh, Theroux, you set such audacious goals. You think we're going to get, you know, below 200 murders in 3 years. Yeah, look, I'm not telling you can get to 0 murders. I'm telling you you can go from over 300 to below 200. I'm not suggesting that we're going to get to a position where every minority contractor is winning prime contracts in Baltimore, but we have to get to a position where at least those 9%, 13%, 21% goals are being satisfied. And I think that could be done if we just started paying a little bit more attention to this issue. And I have to say this, and Russell's heard me say this before. Why did I get involved in this issue? And why did I get involved in this issue now? Did I just wake up to this problem? Of course not. Frankly, I've been talking about this and thinking about this for years. You know, you have friends that have talked to me about this for years. The problem is that trying to get the media and trying to get politicians to focus on issues like this is hard on a good day because it's complicated. When you've got murders and broken schools, why do you want to talk about obscure procurement rules and MBE requirements? It's hard to explain, it's hard to describe. The reason why this case is so powerful, is because you have the now mayor on video saying something is wrong. That's what makes this something we can latch on to, because the guy who was running for office 2 years ago, and I ran against him, but I have a lot of respect for Brandon and particularly his campaign, he signaled that he cared about this issue. He told the world from the seat of council president, he said, this is a problem. What message does it send if people keep failing to achieve these goals and we keep giving them contracts? It was an excellent question, Mr. Mayor. It was an excellent question when you asked it 2 years ago. It's a question you ought to be asking yourself now. And Carmen, I think what we have here is an opportunity to get the public to understand an issue that you know, and Carter knows, and Russell knows, and lots of people that are in the middle of this world know, but the general public, you know, there's 585,000 people in Baltimore. How many people do you think understand this issue? 500, 1,000?
No.
And so we have an opportunity to do a public education campaign and make the politicians listen.
Okay, so two things. Hold on, Carter. First of all, I think that the MBE program does more investigating of the MBE itself than it does the contracts. That's number one. That needs to change. Then you said you did a comparison of procurement and the killings in the city. Well, I think it's a cascading effect, right? Especially in the minority community, because of the simple fact you have, like, if my children, right? They do not want to have, they don't want my company passed down to them. Let me tell you why. It's so oppressive. I spend more time in my business than I do any family time, right? They don't want to have anything to do with it. Oh, mom, that minority stuff don't work. It keeps you as a slave because you just keep working for pennies. That's a cast. To hear the mindset of that is, you know, the millennials really do tell you the truth. As much as they get on your nerves, they do tell you the truth. And to hear that, it's like, wow. And, you know, oppression, when you're in it, you don't really see that you're being oppressed. You just working hard. You trying to make a living for them. And plus, guess what? I tell my kids all the time, it's me working hard that you are where you are today. Yeah, but in the interim, Mom, you still didn't spend as much time as we wanted you to, because you were always in your company.
Yeah, but you keep saying is that this don't work. It can work.
It can work. I didn't say that it
can work. Yeah, but you keep saying it can work. It can. If we had help and put things in place to do like the prime is doing, you know what I mean? To do what it's supposed to do. You know what I mean? Doing what it's supposed to do, it can work. But the problem is they've been getting away with it because they don't want you to be as far as being a general like themselves. So that way you have competition. That's why they don't want you to be a general contractor. So they'll never help you to achieve that goal. That's the whole thing, because they don't want you to be standing next to them bidding the same job. So they try to keep you as low as possible so you don't have opportunity to get to your goal. That's the whole thing.
So I do like the way the 8A program is set up, because they have a mentor protege program. And the way that is set up for 8A on the federal side actually does work. And I'm not saying that it doesn't work, Mr. Moore. It absolutely can work. But it also comes to a point where we have to also show up for our own rescue and really make the statements. We really need to come together and stop allowing each other to be oppressed.
Carmen, I think that last point's really important, because for years I've heard these stories, I've listened to these examples, and people are afraid of stepping up because they're afraid of retaliation. They're afraid that the primes will retaliate. They're afraid that the city will retaliate. And because that is a reality in a place like Baltimore, let's not pretend that the pay-to-play culture is not alive and well. Let's not pretend that the donors and their supporters don't get contracts that the people on the other side are not eligible for. It happens all of the time. And when people are scared to speak up, it becomes worse. And it breaks my heart, Carmen, to hear your example. You know, my mom and dad are both retired city school teachers, and they work so hard. And my sister and I often say that their lives were harder so that our children's lives would be easier, right? It is a thing where the generation above is trying to lay a foundation for the next generation. But my mom and dad, as noble as their work was, as hard as they worked as teachers, they never wanted me to be a teacher because they thought the system was broken. And that broke my heart. I think I would have been a good teacher. I think I would have had a great time doing it. But it was not on the table because they thought the system was fundamentally broken and they were trying to lay a foundation for something better. Imagine if you could deliver to your children, and they could deliver to their children a family-owned business that has passed across generations because the work is profitable, the work is growing, and the work gives you a sense of purpose and dignity. You're not scared of retaliation. You're not slaving away for pennies. You're not, struggling to go from one month to the next. You are building something. And the reason I know it can happen in this country is because there's plenty of examples of primes that pass their companies down one generation to the next. There are plenty of examples of family-owned businesses that are not minority-led, that have been 100 years in the making in Baltimore, in Maryland, across this country. So it's not that the economy is broken. It's that the way we've structured subcontractors versus contractors, especially if you don't enforce the rules that are supposed to give subcontractors a chance to work their way up the food chain, we'll never get there. We'll never get there. But it's not because the dream is dead. It's because the execution is woefully poor.
So with that being said, I think this is a great conversation, and I believe that the program can work.
Yes.
So I would say to you, Daru, when you say enforcement, what do we need to do to make sure that they start enforcing these rules?
I think I'll make 3 very concrete suggestions, because I don't want to pretend like the risk of retaliation is not real. I don't think it's fair to expect every subcontractor that's getting screwed over to jump up and down and to go in front of the cameras and to file, bid protests. It's expensive and there are risks to it. But what I think we can do is start documenting that and sharing that, right? If I'm, serving, I'm serving pro bono, I'm doing it because I think this is important work. I'm not doing it for money, obviously. But if Russell tells me, by the way, there's 10 more examples, I don't want you to share them yet, but I want you to have them. That gives me a weapon in my arsenal. So documenting the failures to deliver on these MBE contracts across the board would be very helpful. Literally just write it down, put it in an email, send that email to Thoreau or someone else you trust. Say, as my representative, you are not to share this until I'm ready, but I want to document this. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is you do have to find strong, clear examples to expose the broken character of the system. I will tell you, I've been waiting 2 years, no less, maybe more than 2 years for an example that I thought was clear enough to explain to the public. That's not because the other complaints weren't valid. They were absolutely valid, but they were complicated. And if you're going to tell a story on television, you've got 2 minutes and 20 seconds at best. You can't tell the complicated story. You can't tell the full history. You can't do what you would do in a podcast interview. Here's what I can say in 1 minute and 20 seconds. Metra Industries 2 years ago was called out by the then council president for failing to deliver to minority subcontractors on 3 contracts that they were expected to deliver 9%, 13%, and 20%. They delivered 0, 0, and 0. Nevertheless, Metra Industries got an $8.5 million contract 2 weeks later. And nothing, unfortunately, has changed, because here we are 2 years later, and we have a subcontractor, a Black-owned, Baltimore-based, experienced subcontractor who has 7 contracts with that same company, Metra Industries. They are owed and entitled to $8 million based on what Metra Industries told Baltimore City, and they've gotten a sliver of that. That, folks, you can say in 1 minute and 30 seconds. That the media could unravel and explain. And my hope is that when those examples start to become part of the conversation, when people start being like, oh my God, is Russell Moore the exception? Or are there 100 more Russell Moores where he came from? You guys know the answer to that question, right? We know the answer to that question. Russell is not the exception. He, frankly, is probably the rule. But we have to educate the public, and we have to shame, in my view, it's my strategy. You don't have to adopt it. I think you have to shame these city politicians into doing what's right. Because left to their own devices, left to their own pressures, they do not seem to have the courage of their convictions unless it's campaign season. I've never heard Brandon Scott be more eloquent during a Board of Estimates than when he was on the campaign trail. But here we are 2 years later when he has the power to stop Metro Industries. When he was council president, he couldn't. The mayor had the votes. But now that he has 3 votes on a 5-member Board of Estimates, he could shut down Metro Industries. He could send a signal that he's serious about this. That's what I'm hoping he's going to do. But I unfortunately have seen in this city that too many of our politicians will only respond, they'll only pay attention if they're being a little bit embarrassed in the media. And so that's what we have to do.
I'm here for it. Another major big problem, in my opinion, is the fair bidding practices. They're
Say
not
more, Carmen.
the bidding practices. Like an employee, right? An employer tells you how much the job is going to pay, right? In contracting, I'm supposed to submit a bid, right? And you accept or deny. In this industry, in MBEs that I know of, they still treat you like you're an employee. They tell you what they're going to pay you. That's unfair. I find that to be unfair bidding practices in this industry, especially with the MBE program. I struggle with that because for you to tell me how much you're going to pay me, you think I'm your employee, yet you don't provide any benefits.
And remember, Carmen, that one of the reasons why primes can get away with that dynamic is because they know that if Russell doesn't fall in line, if Carter and Carmen don't fall in line, there's somebody else waiting in line that they'll turn to. And in the traditional context, unions are the ones that step up so that they can speak on behalf of all of the employees, because there's otherwise you would just hire the person who's willing to do the job, even if it's unfair wages, unfair work conditions, etc. And so I think there is a lesson from that, because I do think you guys have to band together. And I know you're doing it, but I think there needs to be more of it. I think there needs to be more organization. I think there needs to be more coordination. Because if you're just out to get yours this week or this month with that particular prime, you're not having the long-term view that you're hurting everyone, including yourself, by the way, because today's subcontractor, yesterday's, you got locked out because you didn't fall in line.
Okay, so can you be our leader?
Look,
we need a leader. We need somebody to speak for us, because there's nobody is leading even the young minority guys, young kids. You know what I mean? They don't have no guidance. Nobody's not educating them. Nobody. They have nothing. Who is talking
Russell,
to them?
I said this to you before. I'm never going to stop fighting. I don't mind picking fights. I have been blessed to have the luxury of that, right? Nobody can retaliate against me. I am, comfortable. I have lived a blessed life. I have everything I need and a few things that I don't. My family is secure. And so they can't hold anything over my head. And because of that, I have the luxury to say what I think needs to be said and do the things that I think need to be done. And because I love this city and because I love the important causes that that work on, you don't have to ask me. I'm going to keep fighting those fights. But you will remember, you're welcome, and thank you guys for being there to stand up to all of this tyranny when nobody's listening. But you'll remember, Russell, when I said I choose my spots carefully. Yeah. Because there's a number of people that will always say, "Oh, Theroux's just trying to make noise because he lost an election," or yeah, look, I loved running for office. I didn't like losing, but the reality is that I did lose the election, and there are people that I wanted to give a chance. And believe it or not, as impolite as I sometimes can be, I am much more polite than I want to be. I have always said, let's give Brandon a chance. Let's give Ivan a chance. Let's give Marilyn a chance. I've always said, I am hoping that they become the leaders that this city needs. And if they don't, I will be the first ones to call them out on it. And if they do, I will be the first ones to celebrate their successes. Because the reality is, I'm going to live a good life no matter what, right? I mean, I've worked hard for it. My parents worked hard to put me in a position, but I've been blessed in so many ways. But when I choose fights, Russell, as I told you, I said, I want to make sure that we're on the side of righteousness, right?
Right.
Which we are. This is a worthy cause. Number two, it can't just affect you. It's got to affect a lot of people. Carmen and Carter, it's nice to have a chance to talk with you. I knew there were hundreds more like Russell behind him who were not on that particular press conference, but frankly needed to be. And so I said it was important to raise issues that implicate hundreds, thousands of people. And the third thing I said was, I don't want to be your first call. I want to be your last one, because I can't fight every fight. But there are certain causes where no one seems to be listening. No one seems to be paying attention. And in those circumstances, a guy who's got nothing to lose and has already created his fair share of mortal enemies, this is important work. It nourishes the soul. And you know, there's been a lot of talk of football, so it's on my mind. You know, when you get benched, which is what losing an election feels like, right? You are relegated to the bench and other people are on the field. It is very hard to watch your team get slaughtered on the field when you're watching, knowing you can do better, knowing you can do more. So when, you know, the coach puts you in for a few plays, even making a few, you know, first down passes, even rushing for, you know, 10 or 15 yards, we're not solving the world's problems here, but we are making some progress, and the chance to fight on your guys' behalf, it nourishes the soul. And while I wait for my turn to be on the field, it gives me a chance, you know, to not be so, you know, despondent, right? It's not fun. You know, you're sitting there, if you're Lamar Jackson and you're watching your team lose over and over again, you can only imagine how frustrated he is. I'm no Lamar Jackson, but I am frustrated. And so the chance to get in there and throw a couple of passes, it nourishes the soul. So I thank you for giving me a chance.
Well, I feel the same way you feel. So, you know what I mean? So we're going to fight. We're going to fight together. And I hope everybody join us. And then, you know, to get to the bottom of this.
So I know I don't want to hold our time much longer. So I do know that you guys are protesting again, I believe. Metro, do you have a date on that when it's going to be done?
Yeah, the 15th.
The 15th?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to get as many people as I can to come out and support you on that protest, and like we did the last time, and I hope that everybody is there.
Okay.
Look, Carter, I'll maybe close by saying that if this is not an example where a prime is not punished for their failures, then you might as well take the MBE rules and requirements and rip them up and toss them into the fire. Because if a company that has been called out by the now mayor 2 years ago for failing to honor their MBE requirements is now back and has crystal clear made it apparent that they're not going to follow the rules, if they nevertheless get a bigger contract than even the big contract they got before, you might as well just say the MBE rules are paperweights. They're not actual laws and requirements, and we can just all go home. Okay.
Absolutely.
So I'm not going to go home, but you get my point, right? If this example is not clear enough to the mayor and the council president and the and to the city solicitor and if it's not clear to the Board of Estimates, if this example is not clear, I don't know what it will take. And they've got 2 weeks to regroup, right? You might hear them say, oh my goodness, Metro Industries has been misunderstood. Here are all the minority subcontractors they've used. They've actually achieved more than their original goals. The problem with that is, and Russell knows this well, if you want to substitute another minority subcontractor for the one that you pledged to use when you first went and got the contract, you got to go tell the minority office that that's the case. You've got to get permission. You've got to, in good faith, try to negotiate with the original subcontractor. They have not done any of those things. So either they've broken all of those rules and requirements, and they're going to cook the books to tell you today that they've satisfied the requirements, or they're going to have to confess that they have systematically failed to honor their contractual commitments. One of those two things is true. And if the Board of Estimates doesn't realize the importance of sending a signal that these rules have to be honored and enforced, then shame on them.
Absolutely. I like to end on that note. I think that was a great way of putting it. So, I mean, I think if everybody else is okay, I would like to kind of end this so it doesn't go too far. But I think that this was a great conversation, and it's a well-needed conversation because, again, as you know, us being minority contractors, we are out here in the field and we're fighting, and it just seems like that we're not getting no traction. And it's time for someone to stand up. You know, again, a lot of the older guys, they don't know how to fight, or they don't have the fight. But now it's time for us to truly fight for what we deserve.
I appreciate all that you guys do, and I appreciate you guys giving me a chance to fight on your behalf.
And we appreciate you too.
Yes, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, bye.